This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/Red5.
Hey, this is Jedi Master Rob LeBerry, host of the Jedi Temple Archives podcast, and you're listening to... Wait, hold on 1 second. What the Force? Hey, aren't you Dr. Sonny Ravencourt of the University of Coruscant?
Nope.
No, you absolutely are. I recognize you. No, you were in the archives not too long ago. I believe you were on a tour. A guided tour. Look, here's the deal. This temple is not open to outsiders without escort. So you're gonna just have to move right along, or I'm gonna have to get Jedi Temple security.
Oh, come on. I can't get this kind of information at the University of Coruscant. Look at this transcription. This Jedi was murdered.
All right, that's it. We're not gonna have this conversation. Padawan, please go get the temple guards.
Oh, I really don't think you need to call Jedi secure. Okay, here they come. I gotta go.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Goodbye, Dr. Ravencourt. All right, sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, right. And you're listening to ConverSWation's podcast with Pat and Charles.
Hello, and welcome to ConverSWations. I'm Charles.
And I'm Pat, and I still think this is episode 145. Throughout the Star Wars galaxy, there are many people, creatures, and droids that we all know and love. This series gives us a chance to know them better. Character study, Sheev Palpatine. Part 2.
Ooh boy, yeah, part 2. We've dedicated a whole series to this character, rightly so, because he's got a lot of stuff with him. And if you want to catch up with part 1 of Palpatine's story, that would be episode 128, which we did back in March. So yeah, take a listen to that one. And we did his birth to the end of Revenge of the Sith. So that's where we're picking up now is the end of Revenge of the Sith through Return of the Jedi. Which, interestingly enough, as you and I talk about these movies and we have our sort of shortcuts and stuff, ROTS for Revenge of the Sith, and then we get to Return of the Jedi with ROTJ.
Right, and then TROS for the Rise of some or other.
Right. But it's quite similar in abbreviations.
Right.
And massive impact, especially when you consider when the original title of Return of the Jedi was Revenge of the Jedi. So again, same letter, but just a little bit more impact there. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. We're talking Palpatine Part 2 tonight.
Yes. Oh, man. Well, as you mentioned, we left off with Palpatine as he reformed the Republic into the Galactic Empire, wherein he maintained full governmental power as his apprentice continued to sow terror throughout the galaxy. And Palpatine continued to explore life manipulation, which of course was all behind the scenes and unbeknownst to us until the sequel trilogy. Palpatine is markedly absent from A New Hope.
Yes.
Okay, like they didn't mention him, and like that's it. You know, there's an empire. You know, that's all there is to it. Darth Vader and Tarkin and slash the Death Star were the villains of that story, as we all know. But by the time Empire Strikes Back comes around, we know that he's pulling the strings and holding Vader's leash.
Yeah, and as we know with Lucas, that he figured that episodes 4, 5, and 6 were attainable as a set of films that he could do, especially if episode 4 was successful, assuming that the character of the Emperor had been fleshed out in his notes from the prequel trilogy through the original trilogy and through the sequel trilogy, that he had him written out as, obviously there's probably changes and pieces that were different from where he started, where they ended up. But the Emperor as an overarching villain, you could assume that he was quasi-present in A New Hope, while he wasn't mentioned at all in the movie. From George's perspective, he was always there, just it didn't fit into the cadence of the story until we get to Empire Strikes Back.
Right, and there's enough going on in A New Hope that you don't need him there as this extra presence. And much like the whole idea of like Jabba in the original Star Wars,
Oh,
it's just this
yes.
sort of like unseen being that kind of looms off screen that you're like, oh, so we're going to have to worry about that at some point,
Yeah.
which is certainly a thing to drive character development really in the next story, because then you've got interaction with him, between him and Vader and all, with the hologram and everything. So you've got this extra layer that you can weave in later and propel the storyline and the character development. So you don't really need it in A New Hope. So,
Yeah.
again, he's doing a lot of stuff that we find out later. But as we talked about in the part 1, with him doing all the stuff that he was doing in the time of the prequel era, most of that was behind the scenes. Most of his machinations and his plans and execution of those plans were done in the shadows. So it does kind of make sense that he would not necessarily have to be there at the forefront in A New Hope to be like, oh, this is our Death Star, and wave to the camera and all this stuff. Because like when he was doing his evil stuff, he was very much not in the public eye,
Yeah, very true.
If you're going for menacing, like look at Jaws. You're going for the menacing sort of scary aspect of it. You don't see the shark like till the end.
Right.
Everybody watching's like, oh my gosh. Granted, initially when he seized control of the Empire or of the galaxy and turned it into the Empire, he was the face of the Empire. He used that to his advantage. The fact that he was scarred and wrinkled and it was sort of the face of the Empire. So it's not that people didn't know what he looked like, but like exposure can humanize people. That's sort of the old Hollywood, is you would never see anyone from Hollywood unless they were in like a major movie. They didn't do like commercials and all this stuff. Every once in a while they might do an interview, but nothing really crazy, because that kept them as the movie star, So now that you've got social media, you've got interviews, you've got press tours, you've got all sorts of like premieres and things like that. It's like, oh, movie stars are just like us, which is the whole idea of it. But if the idea is that you don't want people to think you're just like them, then you're not going to, have that exposure. And I think at that point in his career, after he, reformed everything into the Empire, he could effectively pull the strings from, behind the scenes and be just as effective, if not more, because, if you did see the Emperor or a holo did come up of him in some sort of orations or like decrees or anything like that, it's taken way more seriously because it's so infrequent.
And then if you add into the that mix, then the disfiguration that he suffered, some would say.
Self-inflicted. Yes, got it. For more on that, listen to our Duel episode between him and Mace Windu.
Exactly. Episode 141. That's like a perfect segue, because he goaded the Jedi into this false sense of, oh, we just need to arrest this guy. Let's just take him into custody, when in fact Palpatine had the ultimate Dark Lord of the Sith power. And once that transformation happened, now whether or not that, his, wrinkly face and the whole bit was part of his master plan, to be sort of an outcast that allowed him to, I am disfigured, but I will still remain, he played that
the
part.
Jedi did this to me. They're bad guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he turned the galaxy into the Galactic Empire, that allowed him to seize power, set back from the public face of what's going on, and just pull the strings as he needed. He had Vader at this point.
Oh yeah.
He had all of his pawns that he had placed on the chessboard for the past 10, 15 years. he didn't need to be that upfront and personal. He just let them do their stuff, and whether check in with the whole holovid, whatever they did, to check in with. But the Emperor at this point was able to manipulate and manage his power from, like you said, from behind the curtain. He didn't need to go anywhere. And if someone did pop up and, make a change, oh, well, we'll just take care of them and wipe them out.
Yeah, I mean, he had a great work from home plan. Like, I feel like he was the one of the first social distance workers in that regard, because again, he could just hang out in his suite, or his I guess now what it's his throne, I guess, and really just run the show, and the way that he had set everything up with the system of the Moffs and the garrisons of troopers, and of course Vader, to kind of keep everyone in line, was like, listen, I got this ship kind of running itself here, so I'll just kind of check in and make sure that everybody is still loyal, and if they're not, then we'll just go.
I'll log in at 8 and log out at 5.
He's punching the old clock. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting how that all came about, because he, obviously he watched the prequels, and he overthrows the government that is in turmoil with Order 66 and everything, and then
yeah.
But then, obviously he dissolves the Senate entirely after that. It's interesting because then, some 18 years later, Leia's aboard his ship, and she's like, the Imperial Senate will not still for this. And he's like, the Senate doesn't exist, lady.
Nice try.
All right. But so what he did was he reformatted the government into the Empire. He transitioned to enlisted stormtroopers from clones. If we remember from our trooper tribute from the clone troopers, they rapidly aged. So you're going to have militant style of leadership, you're going to need an army, a big army. And, well, problem is, thanks to the destruction of Kamino in 19 BBY, at the time of the Galactic Takeover and Order 66, they no longer had access to the cloning facilities, which, I mean, it was all, intended to hide what they had done, and also destroy any evidence of, the plan behind Order 66. There were several facets to destroying Kamino. However, once it was destroyed, no more clones. Okay? So, you can't just make more.
No, and that's where the conscription comes in, right?
Yeah.
The clone troopers, as we talked about in episode 129, they were conscripted to train the new conscriptions,
the new
of the stormtroopers. Yeah, and they were, inferior, and that's part of the concept that we talked about in that episode, is that why is the lore of the stormtrooper is that, they're inaccurate and they can't hit the broadside of a
bantha.
Of a bantha or even a Jawa transport vehicle, but because they weren't bred for warfare.
Right.
They're conscripts. So it was a very interesting time, but with the iron fist that Palpatine had wrapped the entire galaxy around, you can pull conscripts from the central, the mid, and the outer rim. Doesn't matter. You can get numbers at this point versus specialties.
Absolutely.
And that's where the part of it where the tighter you squeeze, the more of the systems slip through your fingers.
Well, and that's the thing too, is now, like a perfect example is in Andor, when, Cassian looks out and sees a garrison of troops. It's like, oof, you think your little, freedom fighters are going to do anything against these guys? Because guess what? There's more where they came from. So you have that sort of menacing look when you've got all these stormtroopers, and it's like, you've got Star Destroyers and all this stuff. It's very imposing. So he was able to essentially keep them in line with just sending these stormtrooper garrisons all over the galaxy. Like, to, even in the far reaches, he had some representation there, which, again, you've got little resources out there anyway. So you got a Phoenix Squadron on Lothal that's like, hey, that's it.
Ooh.
You've got, 6 of them? And, even if you had 30 stormtroopers, you're not going to take them all out before one of them alerts command. And then once that happens, they're going to send whatever they need to over to quash you. Okay?
Right, and just decimate you and you're done. Yeah.
You better know what you're dealing with. So he did all that. And then, of course, like I said, he orchestrated military oppressive occupation throughout the galaxy. A lesser degree in smaller numbers in the Outer Rim, but really representation everywhere. Even when Luke says, oh, you're on the planet that's farthest from the center of the galaxy, I mean, it's some backwater planet without too much imperial entanglements. But still, they're going door to door, checking for the droids and stuff. So, there's enough presence there to be spooked.
They've got a garrison. You cannot have that type of door-to-door presence without having a garrison or at least an entire platoon enforcing the galactic rule that Palpatine has set on these backwater planets like Tatooine. Now, we understand that Tatooine is a hugely important planet for the entire story, but when we see it in A New Hope, you consider it just sort of this desolate, dry, sand-ridden planet that seemingly is unimportant. So you would understand why Emperor Palpatine would instruct his military complex to say, hey, look, get this place under control, or at least have a presence to be able to respond to any incursions or any uprising, or even like a flicker of rebellion because of this pivotal planet within the entire galactic system.
Yeah, so you've got all of these resources branched all throughout the galaxy. And then, not only that, but then you're seizing control of their resources. So, the A New Dawn book about the Rebels, you're just mining these planets and these moons for any and all resources they have. And that includes Durasteel and Kyber for the purposes of authorizing and constructing a planet-destroying superweapon, 2 planet-destroying superweapons, 2 Death Stars. This dude's been busy. Yeah, so, and then, you've got all these, the inner workings and the machinations of these programs, Project Stardust and Project Necromancer, all these things that he's working on, that he's got at least a hand in or supervisory oversight. So, he's definitely keeping himself busy at the front end of the age of rebellion, I would say.
Oh, yeah, and you've got then Thrawn, who's got his particular projects that he wants to see.
Who had impressed the Emperor so much that he's the only non-humanoid to have a ranking position in the Imperial Navy.
Which is huge, because the Imperial Navy was very particular about, we are not making any concessions to other species. We are doing humanoids, and that's it. If you don't fit in with our needs, you're done. So the fact that Thrawn had broken through that level and had impressed the Emperor as much as he had, and drawn, I guess, resources away from the potential of the Death Star, which we see at Rogue One, where we see Orson Krennic, approaching Vader, pleading his case. Those are all these sort of bottom feeders trying to gain his presence, making the War Machine that much stronger by the fact that, whoever's strongest is going to rise, and whoever's the weakest is going to fall off to the side. And if they're done, I don't want to give them audience at all.
Again, it's one of those tough spots to be. Obviously at the top of the food chain, you've got everybody's, looking for scraps. Yeah. So he's got his hand in a bunch of different projects, and he's overseeing literally the whole galaxy. So, it's one of those things where you end up being kind of like when you got money or you got power, and now you got all these extra family members you didn't know you had. They're all trying to, hit you up, because rent's due and all this. So, all that kind of stuff where, everybody's like, hey, look, there's this thing I wanted to do. It's like, yeah, okay, well, wait a minute. all right, so what resources do we have and what resources can we allocate to this? Because I know what else we're doing.
Yeah.
I know the other, 20 things that we've got on the docket here. So you think your thing's important, but you don't even know about these other things, So he's got all of this stuff that he's partaking in. And then, as I mentioned before with Project Necromancer, he's doing like weird scientific cloning stuff and taking blood from little baby frogmen and just, he's doing all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, he's like setting up a contingency plan in the event that his protege would kill him, which, we learned was the whole point from our Rule of Two episode only a few weeks back. It's like, that's obviously the point. You take on an apprentice, that dude will at some point try and kill you.
Right. And that was in episode 142 that we talked about that. And that was the entire setup, is that the Sith Lord expected the apprentice to kill them because that was the way to improve the Sith Order by attrition. So if the current master wasn't good enough to prevent his or her death from the apprentice,
he deserved it.
That was part of the Rule of Two.
Yeah.
So be it. That was quite important. And while all of this stuff was going on with the Emperor in the early stages of the original trilogy, we had the local governors who were wielding power over the smaller systems, and their grandeur, as we saw a bit of that in the Andor series, where you got the local directors and the local magistrates emphasizing their power on local systems. But ultimately, that still rose to the power of Vader, who was that last bastion until he got to the Emperor. So Vader was still the person who would show up and maybe give a presence to the problematic systems. The Emperor was still way back behind the curtain because, like you said, he doesn't need to be there. He's just sending out his minions to take care of any sort of incursion that threatened the overall galactic balance.
Or the leadership in any degree whatsoever. So you've got these rebellions that are trying to heat up on these planets, and you've got the leadership on the planet that kind of deals with them. Otherwise, you get, you deploy extra command and garrisons, and then it gets up to the Moffs and the Star Destroyers, and then it gets to Vader, and then the last thing is you get Palpatine to deal with it. Because, again, he's got a bunch on his plate, so it's like he can't come down to every little thing and be like, hey, listen, knock it off.
No.
But it's interesting because he had specific time frames and all, like for Death Star 2, Vader's on that Zoom call and they're like, so look, we're trying, but like, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough resources. He's like, oh, really? Why don't you tell the Emperor? And the guy's like, oh, shit, the Emperor. Oh, my God. Like, he loses his mind. You see that guy, he starts sweating bullets and the whole thing. So it's like, it was no joke, man. His threat was like present, was real. It's like, oh, the Emperor's coming here. Okay, yeah. I mean, we'll work them until they die. Whatever. We got to do it.
We'll redouble our efforts.
We'll quadruple our efforts. Gonna redouble my underpants.
They're full.
This was no good here. He's still that sort of menacing, but also that problem solving. He's like, okay, you're not gonna, get this done. We'll make sure we get it done because we are going to prove to the galaxy that we are the biggest threat to any sort of rebellion, even down to like Endor. Not the planet, but that far moon.
The forest moon. Yeah.
That's the one with the Ewoks and stuff, the little murder bears. So what happens is he, obviously learned from Death Star 1, like, you can't just have this thing out here. They'll explode the thing like a womp rat. Okay? So he's like, while we're building this, we better have protection. So he's got the shield generator. He's got the shields up around it so you can't get in and out without, your sun pass and all.
Sun pass?
I mean, it works in like 13 states, man. I don't know what you're ragging on him for. So he does this. And then it's like, okay, well, that's that extra layer of protection because he learned from last time. And I guarantee you, he didn't have an exhaust
Yes.
port in this one. He didn't. In fact, Lando and Nine Numb had to fly all the way inside to the core to blow that thing up. There was no chain reaction. There was none of this Galen Erso nonsense. I feel like that got heated real quick for no reason. But that's what happened.
And that's the thing, is that lending strength to the story is that once the Death Star 1 was destroyed...
Good thing he wasn't on it. Do you imagine if he was there for the ribbon cutting? They'd all be toast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yikes.
And end of story. George Lucas. And the story's done. So the fact that, the Death Star 1 was destroyed, it made sort of sense story-wise that he appeared in Empire Strikes Back because obviously
he had to step in.
Yes. And even though that Death Star 2 was likely, under construction while Death Star 1 was being completed because of the resources, like, why build one when I can build two for double the cost?
Right.
Because,
and you think you're in wartime too. You're in wartime. So remember how World War II, you got all the kids, all the 10-year-olds are scooping up aluminum cans and they're sending them off so they can be made into weapons and stuff. And then you got Rosie the Riveter. You got all this stuff going on in wartime to support the war effort. Okay.
Yes.
So you don't think if you've got galactic control, that once it's out in the open and they explode Death Star 1, you're not going to be like all hands on deck to build this second one.
Yes. So you're going to have one supercarrier? No. You're going to build as many supercarriers as you can build at the time. So his transition from playing in the background in the original trilogy...
And kind of in the prequel trilogy as well. Because all the stuff he was doing, he wasn't doing as the public face of Senator Palpatine.
That is a brilliant point. Yeah, he still had that dichotomy, right? He was still playing the entire galaxy as a senator or / chancellor while still playing Darth Sidious.
Yep.
And before we explore that a bit more, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Hey, I didn't expect to see you back in class so soon.
Yeah, well, if we don't hit those exercise minutes, we get docked credits.
Yeah, but you were blasted pretty badly on Wabani during that prisoner escape with that K2 unit.
Yep, but my doc gave me those new back-to-leave pills. They work like Dathomirian magic.
Oh, man! How'd you get those? They're expensive.
I've got PPP coverage.
The Imperial Navy is proud to offer the new Palpatine prescription plan to qualified service members. It's like having the Emperor on your team while you eradicate rebel scum. Just another example of why you should lead the way and enlist today.
I've got to get qualified.
Good luck. Grand Moff Tarkin is my uncle.
Ah, dank Ferric.
All right, soldiers, get in line. And 3, 2, 1. Right leg up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Grab your ladders. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Fictitious scenario using holoactors. Grand Moff Tarkin does not have a nephew. Service member qualifications based on rank. And credits. The Empire and the Imperial Navy never allow music.
And we're back.
Yes, we are.
So good to be back.
It is. It's very good
Thanks
to be back.
to our sponsors, by the way. That was nice. That was good.
Yes, I was very thankful. So before the break, you brilliantly brought up was that in the prequel trilogy, he was playing the Senator Palpatine, yet the underlayment part of Darth Sidious playing the entire galaxy together. Now, as we fast forward to the original trilogy, he has taken a back seat to his minions, well, primarily Darth Vader, and setting the galaxy against itself with the local governors who were clenching their fists around the independent systems, but using the power of the Galactic Empire to keep them under wraps. The rebellion was still going on, especially as we saw in The Empire Strikes Back, because that was the first appearance that we saw after Death Star 1 was destroyed. The the Emperor was like, oh, shit, maybe we do have a problem here. And I need to focus on this and get Vader and the local governors to finally account for this type of destruction. It's like, wow, this was not supposed to happen. What the hell did you guys...
How could you let this go so sideways?
Yes. Yeah, that was a major flaw.
Yeah, so he is, and I would say, bred out of necessity. He's brought to the forefront from nary a mention in A New Hope to being like the big baddie in Return of the Jedi that's literally got a hand in everything. He's orchestrated the air attack and then the ground assault.
Yep.
And then, of course, in typical Sith style, he is seeing this potential new apprentice in Luke, who is could become more powerful than Vader and is younger.
Yeah.
And as I think we discussed in a recent episode about how the midichlorians and or the M count or the just the Force being the Force without any real crazy ridiculous scientific explanation, because it doesn't need one. It's the Force. How it's biological.
Like in Rule of Two, right? We talked about that in episode 142.
I think so. In terms of like how Vader had less M count because he had body parts missing, so the Force was not as strong in him as it would have been had he remained physically intact. So there is evidence to support that. So Luke, Luke lost his hand, but he still had the rest of his limbs. So, if he was the same gene pool as Anakin, which of course he was, and he was more physically whole, he could very well also be as powerful. Now, in addition to that, Anakin Skywalker was brought into the Jedi Order and trained by the Jedi Order and the Council at 10 years old. So he was trained with all of the resources at half the age that Luke was brought in. So with Luke being brought in much, much later and being only trained by Obi-Wan for like an afternoon and then Yoda for a day and a half, it's like, I could probably turn this fool because he's learned enough to be dangerous. And as we saw in the first couple episodes, it's like, this kid, he's impatient. He's not all of the arguments that Yoda had about Obi-Wan training him, the Emperor could also use to his advantage. So it's like, this kid, if he overtakes his father, same thing as Rule of Two. So I'm glad we did that one before we did this one. It's like, look, I'm going to pit this kid against his father, okay? He kills his own father. You imagine what's going to do to his psyche?
And this speaks to the Mace Windu versus Palpatine episode that we did, which was episode 141, where the Palpatine had sensed that Anakin had showed up to his residence, right? As Mace was the last standing Jedi. And if that was the case, well, then of course Palpatine would know that at this point in Empire Strikes Back, that Luke Skywalker is the son of Anakin, as he states. Therefore, that Force-sensitive precognition is that he's sensing that, holy crap, this Luke guy, while raw, is more intact, like you said, and more powerful in the midichlorian count than his father. Like, let's toss this guy out and let's get this guy next in line. So the Emperor is seeing this as an opportunity to not only give himself a more powerful apprentice, but also the ultimate goal of the transference and the whole bit of the...
It's the same thing as when he pit Anakin up against Dooku. Dooku was his Sith apprentice.
Yes.
So then he has Anakin do it, and it's like, listen, if Anakin doesn't win, then he wasn't the right guy anyway. If he does, then all right, great. Haven't wasted the last 20 years of my life grooming this kid. So, it's the same idea where Vader is his apprentice, and if this kid can not only best his own father with the duel, between the two.
Yes.
Not only is he
Mhm.
physically stronger, but then he's mentally broken because he's just dealt with destroying his own father.
And ultimately, Palpatine wants that.
Oh, of course he does.
He's the puppet master at the top of the level, and let these
Mhm.
minions fight themselves, and whoever's the most powerful and the victor, that's my natural apprentice.
Absolutely.
And he's, of course, assuming that he'll be able to control the apprentice and keep him or her
Mhm.
under wraps. But with the rule of two that he ascribed to, I mean, let's face it, Palpatine was a master and very powerful Sith. Ultimately, his undoing is that arrogance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was absolutely arrogant, and he finds himself taking a long trip down a reactor shift because of it. Yeah, no, and that speaks to the whole family aspect in Star Wars too. Is like you've got that connection that is, even though it's been non-existent for Luke's whole life and really half of Anakin's life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you haven't strengthened that bond, but the bond exists. So when you pit this evil guy that's been tricking you your whole life up against your own son, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, pick your son and get rid of this creepy old dude that's been lying to you and master manipulating the entire galaxy for a generation, really. So
Yeah.
that's kind of quote unquote where that ends.
Yeah, because like Dave mentioned, what is that arc of Anakin? They go from the Phantom Menace all the way to the redemption of Anakin Skywalker in the embrace of Luke after having defeated Palpatine, because Palpatine didn't foresee let's call it weakness, or in this case, strength, that Anakin had, is that, wow, you're literally electrocuting my son to death. I'm not having that. Away you, like you said, down the shaft you go, which was just a first step to the contingency plan. But ultimately, it saved Luke and allowed Luke and Anakin to share a moment as father and son. And we saw with Shaw, as he was, unmasked and everything, having removed the vacuum sealed helmet, ultimately leading to his death. But it was that visual, wow, this is my son. And the impact of that scene is just so much more impactful because of the prequel trilogy. And it's a wonderful moment. And you set aside Palpatine, who, like I said, has that contingency plan and will return for certain. It still allows that arc of Anakin and Luke to have that closure.
And not to, beat a dead father here or anything, but you've got Anakin who, the only humanity we see of him is once that helmet's off in the crumbling Death Star. But basically, where you get the rest of that humanity is in the Clone Wars. When you see Anakin kind of, being a good guy, and returning to that is rewarding as a fan to see and to know that.
Okay, guys, finish last.
Hey! Well, there's that.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for the Clone Wars, you see Darth Vader as this like stoic, cold Sith attack dog, as you said, like with the leash from the Emperor. You get an entire different sense of that character by the time you reach the Return of the Jedi, and almost a failure of the Emperor. Because why? You've lost Darth Vader, he's dead, and you failed to turn Luke Skywalker. And it's only because of the contingency plan that Palpatine has. Oh my gosh, the Emperor has returned. Somehow he returned. And it's because the lack of any of his support mechanisms. It's only because of what he pre-planned and set in motion in case Vader turned.
He really could have taken a tip from the great Dominic Toretto of the Fast and Furious franchise, and realized that family is everything. So if he didn't underestimate the Skywalker family, he would have been in much better shape. But he goes tumbling down to his electrified quote-unquote death, and So we'll leave that there. But like we had mentioned earlier, to kind of go behind the scenes, peek behind the curtain a little bit. In the Empire, in Empire, the film, Empire Strikes Back, that's the one. He only appears as a hologram, as we mentioned, and George Lucas hadn't landed on exactly what or who the Emperor would look like, so he pretty much left it to the makeup and special effects departments to flesh out the character. So Marjorie Eaton, who was in her 70s, was the face of the Emperor, under heavy makeup, of course. Clive Rebel voiced the villain, and problem is, he still looked like a 70-year-old lady. So the special effects team superimposed the eyes of a chimp over Marjorie's. They darkened her orbital area and put like chimp eyes over top, and that sort of upped the creep factor and dehumanized the character a little bit, which I guess is exactly what George Lucas was looking for. So they do that, and it's like, well, that works. And then Return of the Jedi time comes, it's like, well, we can't do that again. So they ended up casting the character for Return of the Jedi, and of course, as we all know, George Lucas cast Alan Webb in the role of the Emperor. However, he became very ill before filming, and a young Ian McDiarmid stepped in, and the rest is history. He, of course, played him for Return of the Jedi, and then with the special edition Empire, they went back in and put Ian McDiarmid Emperor in the hologram, and then of course the prequels, they did all of those with him. So I mean, he took it, he owned it, and he did a fantastic job. And he's got a history of some Shakespearean acting. You know, that sort of stuff was perfect for him in terms of the Senate and the grandiosity of his orations in front of the Senate and everything.
Oh yeah. Pure presence. Like we see that in the opera scene where he's talking about Darth Plagueis the Wise, and you and I have a very intimate part of that story where, as we saw him in Orlando, where he, in part of that story where he was sick as a dog, yet performed with an amazing performance in that scene, and trooped through that and stormtrooped. I didn't say stormtrooped, but
yes.
But it's still one of the most iconic performances that is quoted daily with Star Wars fan. But it still highlights how Palpatine was manipulating Anakin. Look, only I can provide you with the power to save Padme, and ultimately ensnared him into that belief that Anakin had to save him, like we talked about in our Mace versus Palpatine episode, is that he was the only one who could feasibly save Padme from her ultimate death. And then fast forward that to the end of Return of the Jedi, is that he did not predict that Anakin would turn in favor of his son, therefore condemning Palpatine to his contingency plan down the shaft of the Death Star 2 before it was destroyed.
Yeah, really. And obviously a limited but still great performance from Ian. But then then you have ancillary material. You have the animated series, Star Wars Rebels. And you've got video games such as The Force Unleashed. You may remember our pal Sam Witwer as the voice and likeness of Starkiller, Galen Marek in that one. But guess what? He also voiced the Emperor in that, and the Battlefront games and Star Wars Rebels.
Because he's that talented.
It's amazing. I love him. Ian Abercrombie, Elaine's boss from Seinfeld, he did the Clone Wars Palpatine, but that's Clone Wars, so it's a different era.
Yes.
But then, once he passed away, then Ian McDiarmid did fill in those last appearances in Clone Wars.
Oh, so good.
So that's him, and that's that. So I guess that is that.
Yeah, and that's that. We're going to move on our third and final part of the Palpatine trilogy.
Yes. Part 3, I guess, will be sometime in the hopefully near future. As we mentioned, part 1 already took place, and there's several other Emperor-based discussions that we've had, or ConverSWations, and the rest of them can be found at our very own website at ConverSWations.com, Facebook.com/ConverSWations, Twex at Swations, Instagram at ConverSWations over there, and on Threads at ConverSWations. Etsy shop is CommerceSWations. And we have our link tree, link.tree/ConverSWations, where you can find all of those and more. The more is the friends in our Red 5 network, of which we are still proud founding members. And they can all be found at bio.link/Red5. And that being said, your friends up there on the Sanctuary Moon are walking into a trap, as is your rebel fleet. It was I who allowed the Alliance to know the location of the shield generator. It is quite safe from your pitiful little band.
Does that mean the Bothans had no real say in the whole thing?
Oh, they died.
Many of them.
Yes, most all of them. Oh, womp womp.
Greetings, listener. Just a reminder that the podcast you just heard is a proud member of the Red 5 Network family. Red 5 Network offers you a great variety of shows you'll be sure to love. So the next time you're itching for quality content, make sure you head over to Red 5 Network. You'll find this podcast along with a whole lot more. All wings report in. It's the Red 5 Network.